I'm not sure how many of you have ever accessed Quick Query or how many of you have seen it and just really never looked at it, but Quick Query is a very powerful tool. It allows you the capability to run queries directly against your SL database. In the old days, you might have to ask a developer or someone in your organization to write you a custom Crystal report to get to a certain data field, or you may have to try to export a regular SL report to Excel in order to massage the data and get the actual details that you want. Well, Quick Query allows you to go directly to the tables and pull the data based on the criteria that you select, and it allows you to see additional fields that may not be formatted on your Crystal report. So today what we want to talk about, as Talisha went over, is what is Quick Query, which we just touched on, how to access it, how to filter the existing Quick Queries. We'll talk about how you can add and delete columns that are pertinent to the information that you want to see to your queries. You can export any of the query results that you get to Excel. You can export in entirety, or you can select rows that you want to export. Additionally, as you look at your result set, if you see a line item that you want to drill down into, then it allows you to open the application and view that record in the application window. And you can also save custom or filtered queries so that you can access them going forward if you need to once a week, every month, however you need to do that. And you can also delete them if it begins to be cluttered where everybody's saving a bunch of different custom queries. Mix those words up. Okay. So one thing about Quick Query, there are over 100 base queries just out of the box. And again, you can access Quick Query and get some details that you need that are pertinent to you without having to customize a report, or even without having to write a select statement in order to filter your results in a report. You can do the same thing in Quick Query. So the queries are available from most of the module series within SL. That includes the financial, the project series, the service series. You can look at orders, which would be your sales orders, your purchase orders, also inventory, and then for the administrators in your group, you can also look at users and customize screens and those types of things within the administration module. And one of the most powerful things about Quick Query is that it seamlessly integrates with Excel. So there's no formatting that you have to do. It's going to give you your data and allow you to easily sort by any columns that you choose to export. So I'm going to go and jump over into SL. And all right, so first of all, accessing Quick Query. Once your system administrator has given you access to the module, and by the way, this is a module that comes standard with Dynamics SL 2011. There's nothing additional that you have to buy in order to look at these standard SL views that come with the product. So once you have access to Quick Query, you'll see that each module section is listed here under the Quick Query subset, and you have some of the modules that I mentioned. When project, as you look in here, you'll see that there are all of the project modules, not just project controller, but you have time and expense, project budgeting, flexible billings. So any modules that you have access to as a part of your licensing, you should see the Quick Queries that are related to those particular modules. We also have field service with the service dispatch, contracts, inventory. We have the financial modules that will let you look at AP, AR data, general ledger, payroll if you have that module. So any module, pretty much any module across the board, you can gain access to a Quick Query for that. Within each module group, you'll see that there are multiple Quick Queries that are predefined queries, and these queries allow you to look at different versions of the data. For example, in accounts payable, you might be able to look at your vendors, your vendor addresses, or if you need to look at documents, the actual AP transactions, then you can go to the documents, the debits and credits. And each query offers just a slightly different view of the transactions and of the data. And depending upon what it is that you're trying to drill down into, that would determine how granular or how global you want your query to be and which query you want to access. As far as, let's just start with the AP documents query. So if you right-click on the query, any of these queries here, you can add it to your screen favorites. So right-click and add to screen favorites, and that allows you to put that query in your favorites. When you go home, you'll see to your home page, you'll see that query. So if you run it all the time, that's a good way to make sure you don't have to figure out where to go in order to run your query. But in this case, we're just going to open it. And when we open our queries, we see several columns. And these are the columns that are just the predefined columns that just come standard with the query. So they're the columns that most people want to look at. And some of these columns may not even be pertinent to the data you're trying to get to. For example, one of the most common things you would do will be to sort or to filter your data, maybe by a specific vendor. You may want to filter by a specific invoice number if you know that. So any column that you see in the query, you can filter any one of those individual columns by typing some information here in this filter section. So if we knew the batch number or we wanted to filter by a specific vendor ID, then we could do that. And once you put your value in the field and you tab off of it, you'll see that your result set has changed, and the only vendors that we see now, the only vendor we see is vendor A002. So you can sort any query or filter any query based on any of these columns that you see across the top here. Any of the columns that are displayed will be here for you to sort by. Any of the columns can also, if you right-click on a column and you want to change the name of the column to something that's more friendly to you, that makes more sense, you can just right-click the column and choose the rename column. And you can just update this record to say OK, and it immediately changes the name of that column so that if you needed to export this data to Excel, then it would be a column that makes more sense or that's relevant to you. And if you don't like your columns, whatever you've renamed it, you can also go back into the rename column and just restore it, and it will automatically revert back to whatever the column name was with the query. Another feature of Quick Query allows you to choose additional columns that are not displayed with the base query. So in other words, the query is looking at a table, and that table may have 75 fields, but this query may only display the top 25 of those fields that most customers would want to look at. But you can go in, and as long as that field is associated with the table, then you can move it over to the selected columns, and then that becomes a part of your query. You can also get rid of any columns that aren't important to you. So for example, if you only have one company ID in your database, that company ID is really not relevant, so you can remove that. Say OK, and that field, which was over here at the far right, is no longer a part of your query. Some other things that we can do is under the choose columns, we can again add columns. I have a lot of clients that ask me, well, is there any way to tell what user created this record or exactly the date and time that this particular transaction was entered? And there are several fields. Most of the tables within Dynamics do have a created user, a created program, a last updated user and program. So you can access some of these fields that you would not have had access to before. You needed to get maybe SIS to customize a screen, now you can come in Quick Query and you can see that type of information. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add this created user field here. And if I don't want that as the very last field on the report, then I can always move the field up or move it down wherever I'd like to have that in my result set. Say OK to that. And we have in here, we have the created user. So for every record in this table, it's going to show me exactly what user created that record in the database. That might not be the last user that touched the record, but at least I know how that record got into my database. Additionally, we can reorder our columns. If you right-click, we can move any of these columns around, and if we decide that, okay, I want to just restore this query to the original columns, the original order, then what we can do is we can click this reset button, and the standard columns that were delivered with the query are now back into the query. And anything that I added has been pushed back over into available columns. Now there's also an option here under Choose Columns. If you want all of the columns that are available, everything in that table, if you have some reason that you want to look at everything, then you click that clear button and it will pull all of the columns over and everything will then be displayed as column headers on your query. If we don't want that, which we don't, we can reset that. All right, so as far as our queries are concerned, if we want to filter, we've kind of looked at the filter feature of queries, but say that you need to do a more complex filter. You want to look at some documents for a vendor, but you also want to only see the documents for that vendor that are over a certain dollar amount. So there's a couple of ways to do that. We'll talk about exporting this to Excel, and you can always pull everything for that vendor, export the entire thing to Excel, and then you can sort and filter in Excel. But if you wanted to, within your query, filter your result sets even more, then click over here to expand your filter capabilities, and here's where you can add a filter. So any column, again, the important thing to remember that I've seen a lot of people run into is that you can only filter by a column that is in your result set. So, you know, you can't have just a couple columns and you want to filter by some that you haven't included. You have to make sure you include that column in your result set before you can filter by that column. So we've already filtered by, say we filter by a vendor ID. So let's just actually do that first. Okay, so that's the vendor we've filtered by. So now if we want to go in and we want to add, say that the original document amount, and let's say we want it to be greater than and includes a value of $25. So now we're going to get a much smaller result set, and because we had the original document amount in our query, then that's going to give us that result set. So here's our original document amount. And we only have documents now that are over that amount. But say, in addition to that, we wanted to only see documents over that dollar amount that were not yet released. So here in this released field, we can go in and we can add that as a filter and say where the released flag, which I know that the release flag, if it's 0, that means false, and if it's 1, that means true. So I can put in here an additional criteria to say, and where the released flag is 1 for true. and then that's going to bring my documents down to just the records that meet that criteria. So you can have several filtering criteria. You can have certain things where your criteria is an either or. There's options to do that. So if we were to add another filtering, we could say or not, and not. So there's a couple of different options that you can use to tweak the data and get it down to the specific records that you want. And if you decide you don't want that, you can just delete that and boom, there you go. Okay. So one of the other features that we have is we can export all of this data to Excel. It's going to open Excel for you, and immediately you have an Excel spreadsheet. It's got filters there for you, so there's not a whole lot of massaging of data that you have to do anymore like you had to when you exported reports and tried to grab your data that way. And so remember, this is data throughout any module where there's a quick query. So even financial data, your detailed general ledger, it's a much easier way to analyze and maybe do your reconciliations. You can see your transactions in Excel format versus having to look at them in a report. And all these filter features, you know, they work this is just plain Excel, so everybody's pretty much familiar with Excel. All right. Another option is if you chose to only copy select records, you don't have to export the whole result set to Excel. If there are only certain records that you want to copy, then you can highlight the first row, hold down the Shift key, highlight that last row, and then with all of those highlighted, right-click and just copy those rows, and you can open Excel and paste just those rows into Excel if that's what you wanted to do. Or you could paste them into an email to show somebody, you know, here's the transactions I need you to look at. Any any Microsoft product, these transactions are going to seamlessly be pasted into that product. So one of the other features that I wanted to talk about today too is the ability to drill down into the Dynamics data entry screen and look at your record. So from any record, you can right-click that record. So the same way you right-click to copy your rows, you have a couple of other options here. And this is going to tell you what Dynamics screen is available for you to drill down into and look at your record. So let's just go into vendor maintenance. So the vendor maintenance screen for the transaction that we're on should open. So we're able to go to look at that vendor, and that vendor is 8002, and that's the record that the transaction pulled up. You can go in here, you can make changes to this vendor record. Say you noticed something was missing, the address, or the vendor didn't have a terms ID. You can go into this vendor maintenance screen, you update that terms ID, save your transaction, and when you come back to your quick query, that information is going to be updated in your query. So as long as it exists and it's saved in the database, it will show up in your query. And I've had a question before, can you just update something in the query and have it show? No, it doesn't work backwards, but it will allow you to save it in the record, and then it will show in your query. You should also be able to, we can also go into the vendor inquiry screen. So anytime you right-click on a record, it will give you the options of the screens that you can use to look at those transactions. Okay, so another feature in Quick Query is the ability for you to save a query that you modified or that you filtered, and you can save that query for use at a later time. So you don't always have to come into the base query and go and each time add the columns that you need, remove the ones that you don't, you know, make all of those changes each time you access it. It allows you to save it as a template, if you will, similar to templating in your reports. So what you can do is once you've got your query all fixed up the way you want it, you can come here and you click the Save button. And it's going to open this window to ask you if you want to save your filtered query view. And what you would do in this window is you would give your query a new name, and you would also give it a description so that you know what that query is, what that filtered query is designed to do. And then you can do okay. So that's going to be the name of that query, and I'll show you how that's going to present when you saved it and when you go into your quick query. Then you also get to determine whether you want to save your quick query view for all users, or if it's for your eyes only or a specific group. Then the groups that are set up in Dynamics SL, as well as all the users, are listed here. So if you want to save the record just for yourself, then you change that option to user, and then you pick yourself in the list, and it's saved for just the K Harris user ID. So the only person that's going to see this particular query, filtered query, is K Harris. If anyone else logs in, they will still see the standard view, but they just won't see this filter view. But if we use all users, then everybody will see the view when they log in. That can get kind of cumbersome, so I'll show you how to delete those if you don't want to see them. But now your view, you'll notice up here it's called AP Docs for A0002. That's a description of the view. And if I close it, the only thing with this, you have to refresh you have to log out of SL and then back in before you'll see the results. So what I'll do is let me log out and back in. Just 1 second. All right, so now when I go to Quick Query, still see Financial, and when I go to AP Accounts Payable, now under the AP Documents, under whichever standard query view that you saved, your custom view or your filter view, you'll see that view listed. And if I scroll through, I'll see a few others. For example, here's another one that's related to journal transactions. So, your quick queries, you can look at your journal transactions, you can filter by journal type, you can filter by any of course you can filter by any of the fields here, but this particular entry it says it's Annie's JE query. So what I want to do when I come into anybody's filter query is I want to look at the filter results, to see exactly what they're filtering by. So I can always come into somebody else's filtered query, make some changes to it, and then as long as I don't overwrite it, I don't just save it with the same name, then I have my own version or my own flavor of that query. So I can save this. If I wanted to save this query, I could. But let's say that we have too many queries out there, and we decide that we want to get rid of some of these filtered queries that we're seeing in our list. Then what you would do would be to go back to the standard query, so the query that this filtered query was built on, and when you get to that query, you click on the name of the query, and then you can click on the query that you're trying to get rid of. And I did not do that correctly. I clicked too quickly. Sorry about that. I'm back here. Open it, click here, and then I should be able to delete That's that query. No, it did not do this correctly. I apologize, guys. I should be able, I'm sure it's just something that I'm not doing correctly. But you should be able to, and I'll check and see if I'm doing something incorrectly, but you should be able to right-click on that query, click the delete button, and it will delete that filtered query. But as you can see, thank goodness, it doesn't allow you to delete a base query, so that's a good thing. So that's the way you would clean up queries. The other thing I wanted to show you, and we've looked at this, but I just want to show you that there are different screens available depending on which query that you're in. So the system is going to only show you those screens that are applicable to the transaction that you're trying to access. All right. In addition to those items, I think we talked about saving our queries. We haven't really talked about a print screen. If you wanted to just do a quick print screen of this page, then you could. But it usually is more applicable to just send the grid all the way out to Excel. And those are the major features of Quick Query, the basic features of Quick Query. There are additional things that you can do in Quick Query, but those are some more advanced features. But I just wanted we wanted to take this opportunity at SIS to make sure all of our customers were aware of Quick Query, how to access it, how to generate their reports, and any other information that they might need in order to harness the power of Quick Query. Looks like I'm getting pretty close to the end of my time. So Talisha, are you there?
Actually, I'm here. This is Gary Vadney, and at this point, we'd like to open it up for any questions that anybody might have. We do have one question coming in. Is there any way my project managers could view these reports from the field?
At this time, I'm really glad you asked that question. One of the features of Quick Query in Dynamics SL 2015 is going to be allowing you to, hold on one second, let me get my PowerPoint together. Here we are. There we are. Give me 1 second, guys. Yes, so there's some new features coming along with Dynamics SL 2015, and one of those features is going to be to allow web access to Quick Query. So you won't necessarily need a rich client in order to access and view some of these Quick Query files. There's also going to be some connection information so that you can open the result set in Excel and refresh your connection, and the most recent data will be pulled into your Excel file. So you'll be able to publish those Excel spreadsheets to some of your users versus them having to go and run their own Quick Query. So there's some exciting features that will allow you to do some of those things. Do you guys have any other questions?
There's one more that came in. Is could a user create their own custom reports?
Yes, that is one of the more advanced features. But yes, with some training, we could definitely show you how to create a custom query that may pull from multiple tables, or may just pull some different data set in, and then you can publish that query for your users to get access rights to, and then they could access and run that query.
Katrina, I see a question up there. Is there a user manual for Quick Query?
Yes, there is a user manual for Quick Query. It should be in your Applications folder under Dynamics SL. There should be a User Guides folder there, and that User Guides folder should have a Quick Query entry there. So that will have all the details about Quick Query. Additionally, if you hit the F1 key while you're in Quick Query, or this is throughout all of Dynamics SL, when you're in Quick Query, F1 will take you directly to the help files that are associated specifically with Quick Query.
Okay, there's another question. Are the quick queries saved in the system, or are they application database specific?
They are application database specific. I'm assuming you're talking about the filtered queries. I'm not sure what the question is related to, but all of these queries are a part of the application database.
Okay, I'm scrolling down. When I right-click on a created query, the only option is to copy rows. Do I have to have special rights?
Well, you will only see those screens there if you have rights to access those screens within Dynamics. So you can look at data in Quick Query, but if you don't have rights, say, to the Accounts Payable module, then you would not be able to drill down into a screen to which you do not have access rights. So that would likely explain why you don't see any screen options if you're right-clicking on a record.
How about importing a simple SQL query into Quick Query?
Importing a SQL query into Quick Query?
Yes.
Sounds like the person is referencing creating a SQL view, which is what you'd have to do. You'd create a SQL view, and then you'd attach that SQL view to Dynamics SL so that you could use that view as a quick query. So that would be a way for you to publish a SQL view so that all your users could use it from within Dynamics SL. And that's not, it's a little more complicated than just running, than some of the things we covered today, but we plan to have an advanced session where we show you exactly how to do that, all the steps to do that so that you can publish your own truly custom views.
It's a custom quick query, and I do have rights to the AP module. What should I look into?
If it's a custom query, then it's possible that no screens or no application screens were associated with your query when it was published into SL. So you may just need to go in and associate the appropriate executables so that those screens will be available and that they will launch when you right-click and select them.
Okay, Katrina, and then someone was kind enough to remind us that the SL user group that's going to be in Boston this September, they will have a session on creating custom queries from scratch. So for those of you attending the SL user group, you may want to check that one out.
Yes.
And as of right now, I don't see any additional questions.
Okay. So give me 1 second. This is